Hello and welcome to Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannon. Today I'm going to review chapter 12 of my newest book, God and Our Superdeterministic Universe, the number one argument for the existence of God. This book is available on Amazon Kindle. Chapter 12 is entitled Cinematism. Is there free will on Earth? The shocking answer is no. And once you understand why, it's pretty convincing that there is no such thing as free will on Earth. For instance, under superdeterminism, Dr. Hansen proved that the universe is a static block reality without temporal causation or continuous causation in time. His proof is found in a peer reviewed physics journal called Physics Essays, volume 33, number 2, June 2020, at page 216. So, because temporal causation is not real, then the future cannot be changed. It's unchangeable. It's predetermined and unchangeable. So you can't consciously choose to do something that is contrary to an unchangeable predetermined future. So, for example, if it's predetermined that your arm is going to move in the future, then your conscious decision to move your arm must also be predetermined and unchangeable. So there's no way to change an unchangeable future under superdeterminism. Therefore, you cannot possess free will on Earth to change an unchangeable future. Your decision making is predetermined. Um, Now, you might think that, we can get free will through some sort of subsistent form or ghost in the machine that animates the body. That uh, ghost would contain the free will and our consciousness to allow us to make freely willed decisions. But superdeterminism proves that there is no such thing as a subsistent form or ghost in the machine that animates the body. And the simple reason is, again, the future is predetermined. If it's predetermined that your arm is going to move, then it's also predetermined that you must decide to move your arm. If you were possessing a subsistent form or ghost that was animating your body and deciding to move your arm, then that ghost would have to be predetermined to decide to move your arm because your arm is going to move in the future and it's unchangeable, which means the ghost in your body would also have to be predetermined to decide to move your arm, which means it can't have free will. So, why would you believe there was a ghost in your body, animating your body to make decisions when its decisions aren't free anyway? So, it seems like an unnecessary additional assumption to think there's a ghost in your body that's animating with the movements of your body and is making conscious decisions. That's an additional unnecessary assumption. You should simply assume that it's in fact your brain that's making the decisions. But your brain is also predetermined to think what it does. Uh, so you're not going to get free will from your brain or from an unnecessary ghost animating your body. But before you get mad at Dr. Hansen for proving that the universe was super deterministic, that temporal causation is not real, you should understand that you're not getting free will under any laws of physics. So, the laws of physics are generally either strictly deterministic or they are indeterministic. So, under Einstein's relativity or classical Newtonian physics, these are strictly deterministic laws of physics, which means that everything in the universe that happens is determined to happen by those laws of physics and the particles and forces in existence, which means you are subject to the laws of physics because you exist in the universe, which means the universe decides everything you do, including everything you think and you choose to do. That's not free will. And if you look at quantum mechanics and the idea of pure randomness under a wave function, which follows a probability distribution, random behavior, purely random behavior, isn't a free choice either. Uh, how can you say that throwing darts at a dartboard, basically randomly deciding what you're going to do, is free will? How is that free will? That's just random decision making. That's not free will. So there are no circumstances under which a human being can exhibit or have free will on Earth. It's just not possible under any laws of physics whatsoever. So that's the bad news. But there is some good news. There is one being who, because he is not subject to the laws of physics, can actually possess free will, and that is God. God is not subject to the laws of physics because God creates the universe and physical reality and creates the laws of physics. So he's not subject to the laws of physics. God is divinely simple without parts. And without those parts, deterministic causal chains cannot be created inside of God. So God cannot be strictly determined by anything because he doesn't have parts that allows that. So God has to be free. I call this concept God's metadeterminism, but it means the same thing as God's free will. Meta meaning beyond determinism or indeterminism. So God is a very unique, special being who actually possesses free will. Cinematism is the belief that a predetermined universe can nonetheless exhibit freely willed decisions known by God, like watching a movie film of God's omniscient knowledge of our freely willed decisions played out in our predetermined universe. So, Cinematism is a reformulation of free will that's available under superdeterminism. So, the idea is God is omniscient and knows everything. This means that God knows all your freely willed decisions in all circumstances, in all possible universes. But importantly, without having to actually create any of those circumstances or universes in order to observe what you do, to know what you would freely choose to do. So I call this God's omniprescience. Because God has omniprescience, without ever having to have to create any universes whatsoever, that means God can create a predetermined universe to exhibit what God already knows you're going to freely choose to do. So your behavior in that universe or on Earth, even though it is superdetermined and predetermined and unchangeable, is nonetheless based on God's omniscient knowledge of what you would freely choose to do. That means even though your choices are predetermined, those choices are based on God's knowledge of what you freely would have chosen to do. Therefore, you own those choices. They're still your choices, and they're free choices. How is it that God could know our freely willed choices? The answer is because of God's divine simplicity. Because God is not made of parts, there are no causal chains in God. There's no determinism going on in God. He's metadeterministic, which also means that God could know what you would freely choose to do without it being God's choice that you do that. Because there's no parts in which to tether a causal chain between God's decision and God's knowledge of your freely willed decision, which means God's knowledge of your freely willed decision is truly your freely willed decision. It is God's knowledge of your metadeterministic free choice. That's a trick that only a divinely simple, uncaused being like God could pull. So, taking advantage of this trick, Cinematism says God uses his knowledge of your freely willed decisions and creates a universe where those freely willed decisions are exhibited in a predetermined universe. God's knowledge of you extends to your whole being in a metadeterministic sense of your freely willed choices beyond any constraints by the laws of physics. So, God's um, knowledge of your metadeterministic freely willed choices is beyond the laws of physics because God is beyond the laws of physics. So his knowledge is beyond the laws of physics, and his knowledge of what you would freely choose to do is also beyond the laws of physics. So your freely willed choices known to God are choices that are beyond the laws of physics. They are not constrained by the laws of physics and are truly freely willed decisions. You can think of cinematism as by analogy as a movie film of your freely willed decisions. The root of cinematism is cinema, and the reason for that is because of this analogy to a movie film. So, for example, say somebody is taking a movie film of you while you go up to an ice cream vendor and buy an ice cream cone and you choose chocolate instead of vanilla. So there's now a movie film of your freely willed choice to choose chocolate instead of vanilla. Now that movie film can be played back and it accurately displays your freely willed choice to choose vanilla over chocolate ice cream. But the movie film itself is deterministic, and it's predetermined because it's on a film in a reel, and it's never going to change. It's always the same thing. So you can think of the universe like that. The universe, your behavior on Earth is like the movie film being played back of what God knows your freely willed choices would be, His knowledge or His omnipresence. So, um, with the existence of God, there is always an avenue to argue for the existence of free will albeit in a reformulation known as Cinematism. If there is no God, then there's no way you can have free will. It's impossible. Um, that's a very strong motivation for most people to believe in God because they want to believe in free will. Now, God has to decide whether you go to heaven or hell after death. And it would seem that in a predetermined universe where your actions on earth are predetermined and there's no way to change them and you don't have free will, then God's decision to send you to heaven or hell based solely on what you do on earth would seem to be unrighteous because you have no control over what you do on earth. But God does know through his omnipresence, prescience, what your freely will decisions would be. And those are your actual meta-deterministic freely will decisions known to him. So you own them. So God can use his knowledge, his omnipresence, to righteously judge whether you should go to heaven or hell. So superdeterminism does not prevent a righteous God from judging people in the afterlife as to whether they should go to heaven or hell. Now, in a strictly deterministic universe, generally strictly deterministic, you have virtually no options when it comes to free will. The best option is cinematism. Some people like to argue compatibilism, but cinematism is a much better theory than compatibilism. Compatibilism says that in a strictly deterministic universe, you are free to do whatever it is you want to do. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. But the kicker is that what you decide to do, your desires, are still determined by the universe, or still strictly determined. So you're not actually free under compatibilism, even though you may feel like you're free. Cinematism gives you actual free will. Actual free will. Compatibilism does not give you actual free will. And it's superdeterminism that allows you to get cinematism because cinematism depends on the universe being predetermined to exist. Whereas under relativity, Newtonian physics, or quantum mechanics, temporal causation is real in those theories. Therefore, you can't get cinematism because none of it's predetermined. So cinematism is a great benefit that comes from the fact that our universe is in fact superdeterministic. It's a form of free will that you would never have access to under our general laws of physics, as most people know them. Okay, so the good news is you do have free will under superdeterminism. It's just a different way of having to have to think about it. So there should be no problem with believing in superdeterminism and the idea that our universe is a static block reality without temporal causation or continuous causation on religious grounds in Christianity. Cinematism is available, free will is available, and God can righteously judge people in the afterlife under cinematism. So superdeterminism is perfectly acceptable, a perfectly acceptable way to understand reality under Christianity. All right, hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. Next video, I'll be going over chapter 13, which is the solution to the free will paradox. Okay. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye.